Stephanie Powers entered the world on November 2, 1942, in Hollywood, California, a place already humming with the machinery of illusion. She was born Stefania Zofia Paul, a name that carried the weight and music of Polish ancestry. In later years, she would explain that her original surname traced back to Federkiewicz, a reminder that identity, like memory, can bend and reshape itself across continents and generations. At 16, when Columbia Pictures placed her under contract, the transformation began. Hollywood in the late studio era preferred polish over complexity, and so Stefania became Stephanie Powers, a name trimmed and brightened from marquees and magazine covers. It was a small alteration on paper, yet symbolic of a much larger negotiation between heritage and ambition. Even then, she stood at a cultural crossroads. The old guard of Golden Age glamour was fading, and a new, more restless generation was emerging. In that shifting atmosphere, Stephanie Powers began learning the delicate balance between authenticity and performance, a tension that would follow her throughout a life lived partly in shadow and partly in light. Behind the polished name and studio contract lay a childhood marked by quiet strain. Stephanie's parents divorced while she was still young, and the fracture left a lasting imprint. In her memoir, she would allude to the tension created by her father's presence, describing an atmosphere that felt unsettled and emotionally distant. His name rarely surfaced in her public recollections, as though silence itself had become part of the family language.
In contrast stood her mother, Juliana Dmytria Golan, a first-generation American of Polish descent, whose steadiness formed the emotional bedrock of Stephanie's early life. Juliana's resilience, shaped by immigrant roots and practical determination, offered her daughter both protection and example. It was from her mother that Stephanie absorbed a quiet discipline and a refusal to be easily undone. Growing up in Los Angeles, she attended Hollywood High School, even serving as a cheerleader during a time when the city's glamour felt tantalizingly close. Yet beneath the youthful optimism lingered the awareness that stability was never guaranteed. The experience of early upheaval did not harden her. Instead, it fostered a kind of composed independence. Long before she stepped before a camera, she had already learned how to carry both vulnerability and resolve within the same poised exterior. By the early 1960s, Stephanie Powers had begun navigating the intricate machinery of Hollywood, accepting small roles that quietly built her professional footing. She appeared in supporting parts in films such as Experiment in Terror, If a Man Answers, and McClintock, each performance a modest step forward in an industry that rarely granted immediate prominence. For a time, she even worked under the name Taffy Paul, a reminder that reinvention was never a single moment, but an ongoing process. She played a schoolgirl in Tammy Tell Me True and the police chief's daughter in Palm Springs Weekend, roles that reflected the youthful optimism of early 1960s cinema. In hospital dramas like The Interns and its sequel, she inhabited a world where moral certainty and professional heroism defined the screen. Perhaps most striking was her appearance opposite Tallulah Bankhead in Die, Die, My Darling, a psychological thriller steeped in intensity. Acting alongside such a formidable presence offered both opportunity and lesson. Stephanie was still finding her voice, yet even then there was an emerging composure in her performances. Hollywood was evolving, experimenting with darker themes and edgier narratives, and she stood quietly at the threshold of that transformation, absorbing its rhythms while shaping her own. In 1966, opportunity arrived in a form that seemed perfectly attuned to the era's fascination with espionage. Cast as April Dancer in The Girl from UNCLE, Stephanie Powers stepped into her first starring television role. The series, a spin-off from the popular spy drama The Man from UNCLE, sought to capture the sleek intrigue that defined mid-60s adventure. April Dancer was elegant yet capable, relying less on brute force and more on intelligence and poise. In a landscape dominated by male operatives, her presence felt quietly progressive. Powers appeared on the cover of TV Guide, celebrated for both her style and the discipline she maintained behind it. For a moment, she embodied the sophisticated optimism of televised espionage, glamorous, self-possessed, and modern. Yet the series endured for only one season, a brief spark rather than a lasting flame. When it concluded in 1967, the cancellation carried the familiar sting of television's unpredictability. Still, April Dancer left a mark. The role granted Stephanie national visibility and affirmed her ability to anchor a series. Though fleeting, the experience signaled that she could command the screen with assurance, a lesson that would echo years later in a far more enduring partnership. The years that followed were marked by steady work rather than spectacle. Stephanie Powers appeared in films such as Herbie Rides Again and The Magnificent Seven Ride, and moved fluidly through a succession of television guest roles. She signed with Universal Studios in 1970, becoming part of a generation of contract players who sustained the expanding world of network drama.
There were series that flickered briefly, including The Feather and Father Gang, where she played a sharp attorney opposite a charming ex-con father. The show lasted only half a season, another reminder of how fragile television success could be. Yet each role refined her balance of wit and composure. Then, in 1979, came Hart to Hart. Opposite Robert Wagner's Jonathan Hart, she portrayed Jennifer Hart, affluent, adventurous, and unfailingly poised. The series blended romance with mystery, creating a partnership that felt both aspirational and intimate. For 5 seasons, audiences followed the Harts through elegant escapades and criminal intrigues. The chemistry between Powers and Wagner was effortless, their exchanges light yet grounded. What earlier projects had hinted at, Hart to Hart fully realized. Stephanie Powers was no longer searching for her defining role, she had found it. While Hart to Hart elevated her public profile, Stephanie Powers' private life unfolded with deeper complexities. Her marriage to actor Gary Lockwood ended in 1972, and soon after she formed a lasting bond with William Holden. Their relationship extended beyond romance into a shared devotion to wildlife conservation, nurtured during time spent in Kenya, where Holden maintained a residence. Holden's sudden death in 1981 brought profound grief, yet from that loss emerged purpose. Powers became the founding president of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, dedicating herself to protecting endangered species and supporting sustainable communities near Mount Kenya. What began as a shared passion transformed into her enduring mission. Even as she returned to television through reunion films and stage productions, conservation increasingly shaped her identity. She worked closely with zoological institutions in the United States and frequently traveled to Africa, advocating for environmental stewardship. In this chapter of her life, glamour gave way to something steadier. The spotlight remained, but it no longer defined her. Instead, service, deliberate and sustained, offered a different kind of fulfillment, one rooted not in applause, but in preservation. In November 2008, Stephanie Powers faced a diagnosis that shifted the rhythm of her life: alveolar carcinoma, a form of lung cancer. After years of smoking, the reckoning arrived with clinical certainty. By January 2009, she underwent surgery to remove part of her right lung. That same month, her mother, the steadfast presence of her early life, passed away at 96. Grief and physical vulnerability converged in a single heavy season. Yet even in recovery, she did not retreat entirely. Stage appearances, carefully chosen roles, and continued conservation work signaled an unbroken resolve. She returned to feature film decades after her last theatrical release, appearing in The Artist's Wife, a story shaped by themes of aging and memory, subjects no longer abstract. As the years advanced, public sightings grew rarer, and the once brilliant pace of premieres and press tours softened. Still, there was no dramatic exit. Instead, there was endurance. Stephanie Powers carried herself through illness and loss with the same composure that had defined her screen presence, not defiant, but dignified, acknowledging fragility without surrendering purpose.
Looking back across the decades, Stephanie Powers' life reveals more than a succession of roles. It reflects an evolution shaped by resilience and reinvention. From a young actress molded by the studio system to a defining presence in Hart to Hart, she navigated an industry that changed dramatically beneath her feet. Television shifted from network dominance to fragmented modernity, yet her work remained a touchstone for those who remembered the elegance of earlier eras. Her accolades, Emmy nominations, Golden Globe recognition, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame affirmed her standing within the profession. But perhaps her deeper legacy rests elsewhere, in the wildlife conservancy she helped sustain, in the communities supported through her advocacy, and in the enduring affection of audiences who found comfort in her poised intelligence on screen. Time inevitably dims the intensity of celebrity. The red carpets grow quieter, the headlines less frequent. Yet Stephanie Powers' story resists a simple ending. It is a narrative of continuity, of artistry balanced with conscience, of public glamour tempered by private endurance. And in that balance lies the measure of her lasting imprint.